Hi everyone, my name is Victor Vasquez. This is VMB, and this is the unofficial introductory video to my channel. In this video, I'm just going to describe to you the style of how most of these videos are going to go, and kind of the inspiration, and give you a good, kind of a good sample size of how these videos are going to go, like how I'm going to talk about the topics and stuff like that. So, for starters, so what this channel is going to be a collection of videos where I'm just kind of giving kind of just a deep kind of interpretation and kind of, speaking out loud thought process about, topics of everyday things. I'm very much a thinker, and I find myself thinking about, things that I experience on a daily and kind of a more deeper level. And from my perspective, I try to approach it in the view of a Christian perspective, because I find myself kind of wondering, if you applied a mindset, a servant's mindset, to whatever kind of situation, whatever kind of circumstance, whatever kind of, debate or, questioning of ideals, where you're kind of just applying the mindset of trying to see how thinking about and applying deep thought to these things could benefit everybody as a whole, how that kind of mindset and, kind of approach would change the world. I really feel that if people took more time to, be more considerate about each other, and being more willing to, see where people are coming from, and have more genuine discussions about why people think the way they think and why it leads them to do the things that they do, and trying to figure out how you can still, serve them and help be considerate of them despite, not necessarily understanding, but also from my perspective, still seeing them as someone that God wants to still be a part of their lives as. And, I have my heart is really big for this. I have a really big heart for this because I think about the where it says in the Bible that God intends for everybody to be saved, and I take that very seriously, because from my perspective, if I'm a Christian and I genuinely believe that, God is the creator of all, and he loves his creation, and he intends for all people to be saved, so then why is it that he can't, he isn't willing to be able to sit down with people and genuinely converse with them about the specific issues and the specific concerns that they have, only because it's not necessarily addressed in the Bible, or it's just such a complex and deep circumstance that there's not enough time. That, first of all, that's a ludicrous concept, right? That doesn't make any sense, because for God, time is infinite. He there, like, time is nothing to him, and so he has all the time in the world to speak to people, to talk to people, and us as Christians, we are the ones being his ambassadors. We're the one being his representatives. And this also kind of is inspired from me lingering on the internet a lot. I go on Reddit, I linger on Twitter, now known as X. And what I tend to see a lot is people being very cynical. And when it comes to Christians and, Christianity and pretty much religion in general, people have a hard time believing that, people can genuinely have faith in a divine being. Because to a lot of people on the internet, I feel, they just kind of feel like, there is nobody up there. There is no omniscient being in control of all of this, and for me personally, I have sympathy for that. Especially within the last couple years, I've had a really hard time feeling like, I can hear God, but I still feel that I'm open-minded, and I'm always trying to see his truth and everything I experience in my daily life. Um, when I go to work and I, have certain experiences where, I'm like questioning how to interact with a certain customer that I happen to, run into as I'm delivering a package, or when I'm walking my dog and interacting with people, as I'm walking around, or even when I'm just hanging out with my dog, or even just by myself, trying to, you know, make my time meaningful and genuine, and my conversations with people meaningful and genuine. And also just listening to people and understanding where they're coming from. Because obviously, all of us have very unique lives, and we all have one life. We don't have a second chance unless you believe, in reincarnation and stuff like that, but, you know, typically people believe that this is our one chance at, to live and do what we want to do. And, sometimes people's lives aren't as straightforward and simple. And I feel like sometimes people feel like there's not enough acknowledgement of that in their lives. And it really breaks my heart for Christians because, I feel like we're supposed to be the ones to be the most acknowledging of that, to be the most willing to approach people with that mindset and make them feel that they're being listened to. That's what we're called to do. We are called to be servants unconditionally. And the thing is I know it's hard. I absolutely know it's hard. I have a hard time doing it. And it mostly boils down to feeling like you have the time to pour into somebody that isn't initially going to benefit you back in return, And I struggle with that with him. I'm currently living back at home with my mom. And, part of the reason why I'm doing that is because he's, getting older. And I've had already like 2 health scares with him in the past 2 years. And, unfortunately, it's not going to get any better with him. And so, my heart and what I choose to spend a lot of my free time with is making sure I spend time with him. And so I understand why people, struggle with feeling like, they're being acknowledged, and, and in a Christian mindset, we have hope. That's what we're called to do too. We are called to have hope. We need to be hopeful that things are going to work out in the future, that God will provide, and, that we just need to trust in him, this no matter what happens. And the thing is too that I feel like isn't acknowledged enough is that sometimes God provides in his own timing, which means it's not going to happen maybe when we need it to happen, and it's still going to happen, but we're probably going to lose things in the process of gaining that benefit and that blessing from God, and for, again, for especially with people on the internet, that concept like just doesn't make any sense. How can a benevolent being withhold blessings when it's absolutely necessary for people to receive those blessings? It doesn't make sense to them, and I understand that too. And I've struggled with that thinking recently. I've gone through a lot of struggles, and I have a lot of doubts in my mind that I feel like I need firm reassurance from God, from him personally, that I haven't gotten yet. And it is very frustrating. So these videos, I can pull topics from everywhere. I think about this concept and this idea, and I apply it to almost everything, honestly. That's why I'm really excited about this project. I feel like I can make so many videos just having these deep breakdowns, these deep concepts, and just addressing them and just sharing them with people on the internet and seeing how it resonates with people. But I've already discovered challenges in these. Like right now, if you haven't noticed, which I'm sure you probably have, I've been moving around a lot. And that's because this is the second video I made today that I'm actually uploading. But I've made several test videos already. And my posture right now and how I'm standing is I am kneeling. And this is hard to keep my posture up like this, because I'm actually having to lift myself up a little bit. And having done so many test videos and stuff, it's been kind of tough. And another one that I just realized too is poor Fido. He's having a hard time. He wants my attention so much, and so you're okay. You're okay. I'm gonna put you right here, okay? You're okay. And it's just things like that. And not only that, but I've kind of come to the understanding that because I want these videos to be very genuine, I have to come at them genuinely and meaningful. And I realize how hard that's going to be, because I still struggle with doubt in myself and doubt in things in general. I realize that I really have to just kind of push through to make these videos, I'm sure, in some points. And this is going to be my first cut because Fido wants to go outside. So I will see you guys in a little bit, hopefully. And I'm back. And that's a real-time experiment to see how that cut's going to look in the final product. But yeah, I mean, with him whimpering, I'm sure that's going to be a thing that happens where I'm going to have to pause the video, mid-sentence or whatever, just to make sure he gets taken outside. And I have another one over here. If you can tell, you can kind of see him right here. Both of them, but I love them. They're my dogs, and I'm gonna make sure they're taken care of properly. But anyways, yeah, I'm kneeling, and I can probably figure out another way, to kind of set in this posture. Probably actually sit down and find something else to do it that way. These are things I'm gonna be figuring out as I continue to make these videos. But I always acknowledge that it's gonna be hard to start out making these videos at first, because I'm gonna start, I'm gonna be figuring things out. I'm gonna have to figure out, like, okay, how am I gonna, well, like, what frame am I gonna stick to? How's the background gonna stay consistently? It could change, and depending on how I want it to look and stuff like that, and what other things do I want to add, and like how I need to prep myself for these things. There's a lot that actually goes into these, and that's why with the format of these videos, I want them to be as simplistic as possible. And so, my equipment is just, a light ring and a microphone that I won from Dave & Buster's. That's my audio and that's my lighting. But I also have a lamp that I have on my left-hand side, your right-hand side, that I'm using as additional lighting. And I think it did a little bit better. It looks a little bit better from my perspective, but you guys give me your feedback. I appreciate your guys' feedback. Again, I appreciate all the people that have reached out to me that have, given me feedback of, how the audio sounds, and even though it's a small sample size, and it's just kind of just silly, random dialogue about angry jellyfish and stuff like that. I appreciate all the views, all like almost 40 views altogether those 3 videos have, and I'm grateful. Honestly, I'm grateful and I'm thankful, and that's all I can be. You guys are taking the time to listen to me, and that's how these videos, this channel is gonna actually succeed, is people actually genuinely just tuning in, and taking what I have to say, and responding to it in the comments, or coming to me personally, and like I said in my previous video, these topics are going to come from all kinds of different, inspirations and thoughts and whatnot, and some of them are going to be pretty heavy. And I feel like there's so many things that I can talk about from this perspective. But I think about them a lot and often, and I always wanted to figure out how I can just put them in video concept and just actually make videos about them. And I feel like I'm actually ready to do that now. And it also could be an acquired taste, my voice probably isn't the most attractive or appealing voice, and I understand that, and that's totally fine. The meat and what makes these videos worthwhile is just whatever I say and whatever I talk into the microphone. And so because of that, I'm really going to try to make an effort to not say too much, to not pause too long between sentences, to not almost said and there's a long pause. To be as concise and as clear with my talking as I can be. And these videos are really kind of like, you know, they're just out of nowhere, pretty much. I'm just making them on the fly because it is good. It'd probably be a good idea for me to have notes and stuff, but because of that, I feel like I tend to overthink what I'm trying to say anyway, and I feel like the best way that I present my thoughts is just kind of speaking them out from my head directly, in a moment. And so, but I do have notes right here. I have another phone that I'm using as notes, and I do have notes right here about the sample size I'm about to present and talk to you guys about, that I think will be a good kind of taste of how these videos are going to be. But yeah, so again, I appreciate everybody that's, willing to give feedback and give me topics to talk about that I can apply this sort of concept and deep thinking towards, because I'm willing. I'm honestly willing, and I feel like it's necessary. I genuinely do feel that this will do good once it's put out there in the internet, and I am genuinely excited about this project. So, but let's start out. Let's give you guys a little taste of how this is gonna go. So, like I said before, some of my inspiration comes from Reddit threads that I read, and actually today, I feel like I read a really good Reddit thread that kind of addresses some of these concerns that I feel like the internet has about, people kind of having a little bit of ignorance about how to proceed in life, and like the advice that people give just commonly without actually thinking about how good that advice is. And there's a couple of them that I have right here listed on my notes. The first one is, don't take no for an answer. And that could be good advice if you're encouraged not to give up or quit on something, right? But sometimes, and it could mainly be addressed to, people that are telling you no when they're not interested in something, or maybe they're not attracted to you or anything like that. Sometimes you kind of do have to be respectful of that, because if you become too pushy for some people, that just leaves a bad taste in their mouths about you, obviously. And from my perspective, I think it's, especially nowadays, I think a lot more people would like their, I guess for lack of better words, they would like their interest and lack thereof interest to be respected. Otherwise, people are just gonna just shut down on you, more likely than not nowadays. And there's not really much you can do about that. And that's dangerous, because then you're leaving the discouragement for them to not interact and be more in depth about how they feel and how they are. And they're just going to be less willing to, express themselves about how they actually are, because you're not willing to respect how they feel about certain things, and, how those things actually do make them feel, because you're trying to push on, trying to insist on just trying to, just wanting them to say yes about doing the things that you want to do, even though they might not want to do it, right? But I acknowledge that, not taking no for an answer has worked for people, and that's why there's some people that are pretty successful, because, they apply that, and, I'm sure they try to apply it in the most, respectful way possible, but they try to take no for an answer, so that way, they don't feel that they're giving up too early. So it's a balance, right? And like I said earlier, like there's complexities to all of these different, situations, like not every situation is the same, obviously, but you always have to be considerate of everybody's angle and where they're coming from, right? And so because of that, you do have to be respectful of people sometimes, when they just tell you no, and you just kind of have to, move on and move forward. The next one though, and for me personally, I've thought about this a lot too, because I feel like a lot of people struggle with this, and the way that people approach this topic can't necessarily be approached the same way anymore, especially with how people respond nowadays and how authorities respond nowadays. But next piece of advice is just ignore the bullies and they'll go away. I've seen a lot of people online have strong displeasure about that advice. Not just from this thread, but every time bullying is brought up. It, you know, and it's, the common examples are, kids being bullied at school. That's where most of the bullying comes from. But bullying also comes from, as an adult, when you're dealing with a coworker that, is insistent on, trying to haggle you or harass you, and, and how do you deal with that, Because, at a workplace, you're probably told to go to HR and report it, right? Well, not all HRs are the same. There's some good HRs and there's some bad HRs, unfortunately. So then from there, what are you supposed to do then? Because then some people will tell you, well, just go find another job. If only it was that simple, right? First of all, you probably are in a job that you really like, and this one particular person it's making it hard for you. So then what do you do from there? Because you don't want to leave a job just because one person is giving you a hard time. But if the person isn't, willing to listen to you about why they don't like how they're acting towards you, then what do you do from there? And a lot of the stories that were given about this advice is, again, in school, there was tons of kids who were being bullied by people, and their superiors, they told them to just walk away. They're trying to get your attention. They just kind of want to get you, riled up and stuff, and they'll eventually stop if you don't give them the attention. Well, for these people, and I'll admit, Reddit isn't always, the best place for like examples or advice or stuff, but I do believe that these are genuine examples of real life situations, and they're from random people online. And so, as a kid, you want to listen to your superiors, obviously, because you want to believe that they know better. But if those advices don't work, where they're telling you to just ignore them, and they keep bothering you, like, what do you do then? Because some bullies, they don't stop. They actually go deeper. They bully you harder, to the point where it was described in one of these stories where a girl came home with bruises and scrapes and clumps in her arm because she was stabbed by pencils. And it's, what do you do there? And the parent that was talking about that, their daughter, they were saying that they even went up to the parents of that particular student that was bullying their daughter, and they just were given the cold shoulder. They're like, I don't know, what do you want me to do about it? Like, what do you mean? What do you want me to do about it? Your child is hurting my daughter. It's not good. They need to stop. And what's crazy is there are people out there that just don't want to, they don't want to acknowledge or accept the accountability of the wrongdoings of their children. And that's what causes a lot of problems with people just having low patience for other people in the world, where they just don't expect people to take accountability for their own actions and decisions, especially if that's your kid. Like, I mean, obviously all parents want to give their children the benefit of the doubt, but like, when your child is physically hurting another student, you're just going to turn the blind eye. Like, why why would you do that? And so I don't have a clear answer for this, because the end of the story for most of the people that were sharing They just said that their students just beat up the bullies and they stopped. And I mean, I don't want situations to, you know, end up in a violent outcome, but I mean, if nothing else is working, what else are you supposed to do, you know? And for these stories too, you know, they've also shared how when when their child or when they themselves retaliated back to the bullies, they got in trouble. So so not only are you getting in trouble for defending yourself, but then now, like, was there any lesson learned from the bully? Like, sure, they stopped, but if they see that you're getting in trouble for defending yourself, so then that's just encouraging them to know that they're not going to get punished for what they're doing, right? So then where do you go from there? Because you would just have to assume it's going to be a rinse and repeat cycle. And again, these are the majority of stories I see in response to bully stories, and seeing, you know, authority figures of schools, you know, punish the victims rather than the bullies. And it's so sad. It's just discouraging actual communication if the authority figures aren't willing to recognize the situation to begin with, or acknowledge the problem and address it properly, until the victim actually stands up for themselves, which is such a crazy thing. Like, why does it take the victim to stand up for themselves for the authority figures to actually do something about it? Why? That doesn't make any sense. And my heart breaks for children that are in those kinds of situations, because some of them receive harsh bullying, and it still gets unaccounted for. Parents still don't take accountability or responsibility for their children that are doing the bullying to that extent. Like, what? It's so sad. So, but again, I don't have any clear answers. I don't know what. I mean, I would feel so helpless if I was a parent having to deal with a bullying situation. And I know not every parent deals with that, but the fact of the matter is that there are people that do deal with that. And those are the situations, not just in bullying, but in every sort of situation where there are certain people that get the short end of the stick. Like, how do you reach out to them and reassure them of hope, right? Without having to resort to violence or bitterness or frustration towards other people. Like, how do you do that? And these are one of the things that, you know, I think about, you know, because it just takes people actually acknowledging a problem and addressing it properly. And I personally don't understand why that's so hard. I really don't. I mean, it could be people know each other. It could be politics. I mean, it could be anything. And that's terrible in and of itself. Why is somebody's well-being coming after the, you know, like, why does someone's well-being have to come at the expense of you knowing somebody, and you just don't want to be in somebody's bad graces? That's just awful. That's terrible. But there's that one. The next one, I think it's pretty interesting, because I see this up. I kind of apply this when people talk to each other on forums, and it's interesting how the internet has lowered people's accountability about this with each other. But the next one is just be yourself. And there's a better phrasing for this, you know, because this is good advice when it's phrased like this, right? When you say, be a better version of yourself. Like, obviously, you should always be wanting to better yourself every day if you can, you know, and we're all going to go through struggles. We're all going to have our shortcomings, you know, and fail. And that's inevitable sometimes, you know. Sometimes you just can't help that. But I think for some people, there are certain mentalities and ideals that are not beneficial to them or the people around them, right? And because of that, they affect the people around them, the people that they love, and sometimes there's no accountability for that. And I think before the internet, there was more accountability for this, because Not many people could just go online and just talk to random strangers that had the same ideals and same mindsets and feel validated about that. I think before the internet, if someone didn't really have a good mentality about something, people were willing to, uh, make that person be accountable for their thoughts and for, how they reacted to things, But I feel like nowadays, because you probably interact with people of the same mentalities more likely than not, there isn't accountability for that because you're being validated by people that feel strongly about those same ideals, even if they're not good. If they feel validated about that, then they just continue to grow and as a group, and then you just can't really convince them otherwise. And so that's kind of an interesting thing because you know yeah, again, you want to build yourself and better yourself all the time, but if people feel like what they're building towards is good even though it probably really isn't, if they have people to still support them, you know then how are you going to convince them otherwise? If they feel that if they're being encouraged and validated, then they're just going to be encouraged to continue going on. And that's another thing I don't know like how you address that, right? Because again, before, if it was just a singular person that didn't have any validation from anybody around them, then you were able to kind of just tell them like, hey, maybe you should reconsider that sort of thinking and kind of take a step back from it because that's probably not going to take you anywhere good. But nowadays, there's too many people that think the same way, that have access to a platform to express how strongly they feel about that. And then from that, you can't just take the internet away from them. Some of them are grown adults that think like this. They're not just kids that you can just take away their phone and be like, okay, no more internet for you. Like, some of these are grown adults that think this way, and it's fascinating. It's incredible how many grown adults are willing to encourage people to think in a way that's not beneficial of other people. And I think we've experienced that a lot in the recent years, which is it's pretty crazy. And I'm just very curious how we're going to find a resolution for that. How we're going to be able to keep people accountable in that. So there's that one. And this one's the last one, but I think this is a pretty interesting concept when it, thinking about it as a Christian. It's forgive and forget. And the thing about that is, I believe that my God is a God that forgives and forgets. If you sin, he doesn't hold it against you for all eternity, because it is said that if you believe in Jesus Christ, then you are wiped clean of your sins. If you believe in what Jesus Christ did on the cross, you are wiped clean, and there are no records of any wrongdoing whatsoever. And that's an interesting concept, right? Because to forget about a wrongdoing is to set yourself up for to potentially happen to you again, right? Because people say that they don't want to forget about what that person did to them because they don't want it to happen again to them. Like, sure, you can forgive them as many times as you can, but you don't want it to continue to happen, right? You don't want it to continue to hurt you or the people you love, or continue to hurt them in general. Like, probably a good example is addiction, right? Like, you can forgive somebody about how their addiction is affecting them, but to forget about it is what does that entail? Like, what does that mean to forget about a wrongdoing? Because are you just gonna ignore how it affected you and just show no emotion? And how does that person receive it, right? That's kind of the thing that you have to think about, really, is how that person that you're trying to forget about their actions and how they affected you, how they're going to take that, and whether they're actually going to acknowledge what they did was wrong and actually stop, or they're going to acknowledge that what they didn't really affect you, and they're just going to do it again, potentially, if they don't have the strength to do it on their own, right? And if you're going to help them to move on from those struggles, well, you're going to have to acknowledge that those struggles existed to begin with, right? So that's an interesting concept in and of itself. Because again, it comes back to whether you're willing to be hurt again, or you're willing to potentially let other people be hurt, because you're just, it's a lack of acknowledgement of the initial wrongdoing. And I mean, if you guys want to comment about it, you guys can, say like, oh, well, there's like this certain situation, there's this certain situation where, forgetting isn't necessarily not acknowledging what happened, but, it's essentially just forgetting that it happened, so that way you can move forward with the healing process and the process of getting better. And I understand that. But again, it comes back to what you think. What do you think it means to forget? What do you personally think it means to forget about something, and how you believe a specific healing or growth process looks like in the concept of what it means to forget about what happened in order to move forward. Again, I don't really have answers for a lot of these, and for me personally, like, to forgive and forget, that's probably the most righteous thing to do, right? Like, that is probably the most righteous thing to do. But in that, I feel like whoever says that has to acknowledge that some people are going to take advantage of that mentality and are potentially going to do it again if they feel that there is no accountability. So how do you keep somebody accountable of their wrongdoings and encourage them to move forward with them while acknowledging what they did? Because for them too, they have to acknowledge what they've done wrong and why it's wrong in order to know how to make it right. But in order to do that, you have to remember what happened, right? So again, comment or reach out to me privately about how you view that specific concept. And if you're a Christian, give me your biblical interpretations about it and your, how you view it, and I'll receive all input about it. I encourage it. I really want it, because I plan on making videos that are titled the same way, but in parentheses labeled revisited. And I plan on doing a lot of those kinds of videos too, where I kind of just revisit these sorts of topics and concepts, And if you haven't seen by the video time already, I talk a lot. I genuinely do want to acknowledge as much as possible about these certain things, and these are already like 5 different concepts, that I can probably dig even deeper, perhaps, but again, these are just kind of sample sizes, but here's a real world example for me personally that I really like, that it's going to address another heavy issue that's going on in the world right now. A couple days ago, I was delivering packages for Amazon, and I was blessed to have met an Israeli woman who was Christian that moved here from Israel, that was running her own kitchen in the basement of an office complex. And, I was encouraged to go buy some breakfast burritos because I saw them advertised in the elevator as I was going up and down the floors. And I like breakfast burritos. If you really want to make my day or help make my day, feel free to buy me some breakfast burritos, because that's one of my favorite foods to eat. And so, sure enough, I saw the pricing and I'm like, yeah, I'll give it a try for that price. Went down to the basement of the office building, and I saw this, this woman, and I approached her. I talked to her about, how I was curious about the breakfast burritos, and we just got to talking. And it was an incredible blessing to meet a sister from Israel. I don't know if I'll ever get the chance to go to Israel myself, but to get the chance to talk to somebody that came from Israel, I think that's a blessing in and of itself. That, at least it's somewhat, an ability to know the culture. And she had a thick accent, and so I was trying my best to have a good conversation with her, which I think we did. But I find what's interesting about that conversation that we had, and the conflict in Israel between the Israelis and the Palestinians, it's still a very hot topic that people have strong opinions about, that I completely acknowledge. The whole situation is very, very complex for both religious reasons and just, territorial reasons. Like, and from my personal stance about it all is people are dying nonetheless. And I just care about the people dying. Children are dying. And, whether one side is instigating it or not, I feel like people just need to just come to a peaceful resolution so people can stop dying. It breaks my heart for the people that are dying, especially for me as a Christian, because I don't know if they knew God before they passed away. And that might not matter for a majority of you guys, and I completely acknowledge that. So besides that, if we are in a mindset that we only live once, people are dying for a conflict that, if people were just more willing to think about the lives being lost than the territorial or religious, I guess, conflicts. And look, I'm not gonna be one to, discredit any religion or anything like that, But again, if people's lives are dying, I feel like you have to at least reconsider why you have a conflict to begin with. Especially because from my perspective, and this is why it resonates with me a lot, because I remember what the Bible says about turning the other cheek, right? To what extent do you do that? To what extent do you actually turn the other cheek? Like how much as a Christian should you be willing to, be afflicted by the other person in order to show God's love? And so when I think about this, it's like, I know the Israeli people feel really strongly about their territory and what their land is, and so do the Palestinians. But if we're going to apply that concept to real world events, what should we say? Should we say that they both just need to just kind of take a step back to accept their loss? Like, what do we say about that, Or would one party just acknowledge their loss and then let's just move on? But again, like, it's such a complex situation because people have settled their homes and their livelihoods in these areas pretty much with their enemy, their direct ideal enemy, and they cannot coincide in peace. But I think that concept in the Bible addresses that. But because of that, as a Christian, from my perspective, and again, if people want to comment and give their personal input about what they believe about this, go ahead, go ahead. I encourage it. But from my perspective, that concept comes from the idea that you acknowledge that there's an afterlife where all your treasures are going to be had. Where you acknowledge that as a Christian, you understand that we don't live for this life on earth. We don't live to try to protect and maintain all the stuff we have here on earth. Now, when it comes to losing family members and, your well-being of health, that's an even deeper concept that I can probably talk about later, right? But as far as turning the other cheek and giving up your cloak because someone takes you to court for it, right? And the Bible saying to give it up, to what extent? To what extent do you go for that? And I know that's up to interpretation for all people. And I am in complete acknowledgement of that. And that's what I want to do with these videos. Is, again, I'm in the mindset of how it benefits all people for the sake and this is my own personal desire. But for all people to at least still maintain a livelihood, to still maintain their lives, for the sake that they can still get to have the opportunity to know God, at least, to live another day, to at least not be harmed by daily life. And another thing that just to acknowledge in general, right? I live here in the United States, and I am one of, if not the 1% most blessed people on earth, despite me having lived most of my life impoverished. Because there are people in other countries that have it a lot, a lot worse than me. And to the point where I question why God placed me here in the US. Why was I born in the States where there's people in the slums of India where they're living in giant concrete pipes with absolutely horrific sanitary conditions? Why there's people enslaved living the rest of their lives like that, and human trafficking living the rest of their lives like that? Why did I get to live this life like this? Which goes back to my struggle of listening to God and wondering what He wants for my life. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to make these videos too, because at least for me, this is something that I feel I can contribute to the kingdom from my perspective. That I feel everybody can resonate with. That everybody can connect with. Truthfully and honestly. But I'll bring another concept into that, and then I'll move on to my next two. And again, look, the video length, I can talk, so, but I'll bring this one and then I'll move on to the other ones, and then that'll be it for this introductory video, which is already 45 minutes long, 46 minutes long. I'm telling you, I dig deep. But before the end of the year, I finally got the chance to watch Sound of Freedom. And that is such a powerful movie. But the one thing that always annoys me with those inspirational stories is people get so worked up about wanting to, act on, how much they got encouraged by those movies. And nothing happens. And I think one of the main reasons why is they know what it takes to do something great like that. And a lot of the times they're not willing to take that risk. For Tim in the movie, and I'm sure his family acknowledged that this was a risk of this magnitude, but Tim risked his life. And his family acknowledged that they could potentially lose a husband and a father. And that in itself just opens up a whole bunch of complications in the future, not having a husband or father to help provide for them, to help support them growing up for kids and all different kinds of things. But, I mean, they took that risk. Tim took that risk to look for 2 kids that he didn't even know. That it was not going to be of any benefit to him whatsoever. And that's rare. That is a rare type of courage that not everybody has. And today we have, I don't know if it's almost or it is 8 trillion people in the world. And there's only how many of a 0.1% of all those people that have that kind of courage, potentially, that are willing to risk their own lives, let alone potentially risking struggle for their family, for people that they don't even know. There are not all 8 trillion people in the world are willing to do that. And it's interesting too, because the Bible says that the path to eternity is narrow. And that's a prime example of it. Because not everybody is willing to give up what they built, their livelihoods, what they've earned in life, for someone they don't even know, for the sake of their livelihood. Right? And so, not to say that it's not cool to be encouraged, but people really, really have to, I just personally feel like those movies just only give people the feel goods, and then allows them to acknowledge that there's someone else doing it, perhaps, so they don't necessarily feel like they have to go out and do it. And that's probably a really cynical way to view it, And I'm sure there's tons of people that were encouraged by it, But there's obviously not enough, and there's so many kids out there, millions of kids. Tim was only able to save almost a couple hundred kids in the whole span of him working to save those kids. Only a couple hundred when there's millions. And I'm sure there's people still working to save those kids, and their work is very, very much admirable. But there's still so much that needs to be done. And who's willing to do it? Who is willing to do it? Knowing that there's some powerful people that you're going to be making upset by doing this. But who's willing? So, yeah, there's that. But on a more lighthearted note, and I have one thing on top of this, but I'm going to bring up the last point that I have, because I think it kind of ties in. But for those who know me, and not a lot of people know this because it's kind of just a throwaway fact, I suppose, but one of, if not my favorite shows of all time, is My Hero Academia. And I love that show so much because it's a story of giving a chance when no one else would give you a chance, of happenstance, of you just being in the right place at the right moment, and growth, and testing your limits. But the thing that resonates to me the most with that show is unconditional servanthood, which is the essence of being a hero, right? To be a hero, you have to acknowledge that however you're going to serve or try to save someone, you are risking your life. And you will do everything you can in the risk of risking your life to save someone. And that's, for me personally, that is the essence of being a Christian as well. That if we truly believe that eternity, the afterlife, is the main goal, and that's what everybody should be shooting for, should be working for, then nothing here on this life should be worth more than trying to save someone eternally in the afterlife, right? Like, hypothetically, or, however. So because of that, you probably have to have a hero mentality to always be willing to serve someone to the extent that you're self-sacrificing yourself in a little bit to ensure that someone gets to know that they're loved, gets to know that they're worth it. And for me personally, to get to, you're willing to sacrifice almost anything so that they can get to know God, that they can get to know the love of God, at least, right? But again, back to, it kind of connects with the previous topic, some people aren't capable of doing that. Some people have developed too much of a livelihood that they hold so tightly in their hands that they're not willing to risk that at all. And so because of that, so then who will? Who is willing to do it? And I believe that God, with his omnipresence and his omniscient power, with his almighty power, that he is willing to intricately set up people to be able to reach out and evangelize in a ways where they don't have to compromise their livelihood. I get that, but not everybody gets to have that luxury. And I actually personally struggle with that, because there's a lot of times where I feel like, I genuinely feel like God does want me to be homeless so that I have no earthly attachment whatsoever, so I can just simply focus on growing closer to him. I genuinely feel like that sometimes. And being homeless is not appealing to anybody. And obviously not all Christians are homeless. So then, so then sometimes it's the struggle of people like coming to the realization like this is what God wants from me. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can trust him enough to let him lead my life down this path to where I'll have nothing, to where I'll have nobody but him. That is a concept very, very, very hard for the majority of people on this earth to grasp around, and that are not willing at all to even think about. And I sympathize with that. I even sympathize with that. Because how are you going to ask somebody to be homeless and just struggle for the rest of their life for something they can't see? For someone that they can't hear from all the time? Because there's no guarantee God's always going to speak to you either. Because it's in his timing. And there are times where God is going to allow you to be in the dark for growth. And as Christians, we submit to that. But again, not everybody is understanding of that concept. And I struggle with that too. And that's my hope for these videos too, is to help me be able to better hear God and grow closer to him and dedicate these videos to his glory, to give to, I do believe that even questioning things about him, I encourage people to go to him, to talk to him, that haven't talked to him in a while or ever before, because I believe he can handle them. I truly believe God exists, and his almighty power, our thoughts and our hearts, he's not scared of any one of us. He's not scared of how dark our minds can go, how dark our hearts can be. He's not scared of any of that. He's everywhere. If he's omnipresent, he is everywhere. He sees everything. So there's no place too dark for him to be at that he can't see. There is no place that he is unable to get to. But for some people, they just can't get there. They just can't accept that sort of reality. That could be the reality, because that's what God wants for them. And again, just tackling those kinds of concepts and acknowledging that, and sympathizing with people who question that, Again, these videos are just talking those out and encouraging people to respond in the comments, and to give me topics to kind of dig deeper in that connect to those things too. But the last thing I'll talk about, and then I'll finish this almost hour-long video now, is this guy. I don't know if you can see him. There he is. He's sleeping now. He doesn't need my attention right now anymore. But he's my baby. I love that dog so much. And because of him, I do not feel ready at all to have any kids anytime soon. And thankfully, I'm single, so there's no risk of that, right? Anytime soon. But he's a handful for me already. And that's perfectly fine for me, because he is my baby. I love him so much. And every day, there are moments where I look at him and I think that God looks at me the same way. Where, I look at Fido and he doesn't know any better. Every time I tell him we're going for a walk, he just wants to zoom out the door. He's ready to get out, beeline it. And he'll disregard anything around him just to get as far out into the open as possible. And I have to watch him about that. I have to watch him for that, because who knows what could be around that I have to be looking ahead of in order to protect him. And I know God sees me the same way. I know God sees all his children the same way. Where we personally don't know what's up ahead, but God does. And He tries to speak to us, to prepare us or to warn us about what's coming up ahead. Not all the time, but, God looks at us as we don't know any better. We don't. And Jesus said that on the cross. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And we don't. Because again, going back to the concept of people not always acknowledging and being considerate of other people's struggles and pains, and how, our actions could be consequences that affect them too. Like, God knows all that. And because of that, I think we all need to think of each other in that sense, where we always have to be in acknowledgement of how our thoughts and our actions do affect each other, because our hearts and how our hearts develop and what our hearts contract as far as like emotions, people can contract bitterness because they feel like they're not being heard enough or acknowledged enough. Or people can contract loneliness in their hearts because they don't feel like anybody's there to listen or to lift them up. Or sometimes people get too spoiled in their hearts where they're always expecting somebody to be there when they can't. That sometimes people have to walk life alone, or from my perspective, with God alone, in order to learn something that they need to learn on their own. But I mean, Fido, he's old now. He's almost going to be 14, and he still likes to act like a pup, and he still likes to jump around and, face dogs that are younger than him, that have more energy than him, and that doesn't faze him. But he doesn't know any better that his body isn't capable of producing that sort of energy and those sort of motions anymore. And I have to protect him. Or whoever's looking after them, they have to protect him. But he's my dog, so I take the responsibility of protecting him from that, from himself. And I see God the same way, even though, again, I still struggle with not being able to hear him, but I still believe in him. And so again, for me personally, I just try to make decisions, and I try to have thoughts and concepts that I feel at least glorify him despite me not being able to hear him. And doing these videos, I think, is one of the ways that I can do that still, when I can't hear him all the time. And I think they'll be beneficial for everybody. So, to everybody who's been willing to listen to this hour-long video and watch me move and sweat and watch the cut that I did earlier so I can take Fido outside and hear Fido whimper every now and then, thank you so much. And I promise you, not every video is going to be this long, if at all anymore. This is just to give you a little taste and a little sense of how the videos are going to go and what they're going to, what the meat of them is going to be and stuff like that. But to anybody who's listened all the way, and to anybody who just gave it a little listen here and there, I thank you so much. And I appreciate you all for your support, for your feedback. And thank you. That's all I can say. You took your time, your time that you're never going to get back to listen to me. And I hope that all that I said could resonate with you and is meaningful for you and helps you, think about things and stuff like that, and helps you to be able to be more considerate and see how you can benefit other people more. That's the main goal of these videos. So I appreciate you all, and I'll come out with an official, actual introductory video that's a lot shorter than this. It's more concise and has a more organized plan of how these videos are going to go and stuff, but this is just more kind of on the spot, on the fly, and yeah, this is it. This is the start. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate you all. Like, subscribe, and if you want to stay up to date, I'll try to post videos as often as I can. So again, I thank you all, and I appreciate you all. Take care, and God bless. This is VMV signing out. Take care. God bless.